You think you know betrayal? You think you know what it feels like to have your heart ripped out by the one person you're supposed to trust unconditionally? Let me tell you, you don't know a damn thing. Not until your own son, the boy you raised from nothing, steals your life's savings, looks you dead in the eye and says, "This is your boarding fee, old man. Welcome to the real world." He left me with a crumpled $20 bill and a handful of change. My entire existence reduced to less than what he'd spend on a cheap bottle of wine. I was shattered, humiliated, a ghost in the house I'd built with my own 2 hands. But that was just the beginning. 3 months later, when the judge's gavel fell, and he was forced to pay me back every single cent, plus a hefty price for his sins, the look on his face was something I'll treasure until my dying day. You will not believe the hell I unleashed to get my justice. Before we dive into the wreckage of my life and the brutal reconstruction that followed, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. And I want to know right now in the comments below, what's one thing you would never ever forgive? Let's get this conversation started, because this story is going to test your limits. The scent of burnt toast and betrayal hung heavy in the Philadelphia air. It was a Tuesday in early March, the kind of day that can't decide between the lingering bite of winter and the false promise of spring. My son, Kevin, a man whose tailored suits cost more than my first car, slammed his fist on the oak dining table. The table I'd bought with my first big bonus from the steel mill. The table where his late mother, Eleanor, had served 1,000 family meals. A glass of orange juice trembled, wobbled, and then crashed to the floor, a splash of garish color against the worn hardwood. My grandchildren, 8-year-old Lily and 10-year-old Noah, froze like startled deer, their spoonfuls of cereal hovering halfway to their mouths. Their eyes, wide and terrified, darted from their father's contorted purple face to my own. "You can't be serious, Dad. You can't just quit. We're counting on that income." Kevin's voice was a ragged edge of desperation. The carefully constructed calm of the financial advisor he pretended to be had completely vanished. He leaned across the table, his knuckles white, his cologne a sickeningly sweet assault on my senses. I refused to flinch. I sat up straighter, my old bones protesting, and met his furious gaze with a placid resolve I'd been rehearsing in my mind for months. This wasn't a whim. This was a declaration of independence I'd been planning since Christmas, when I'd caught him staring at my pension statement online, his eyes gleaming with the predatory hunger of a jackal. 67 years, Kevin. 45 of them spent in the heat and the noise of that mill, breathing in metal dust so you could go to college and wear those fancy suits. It's enough. I've earned my damn rest. The words settled over the kitchen like a shroud, thick and suffocating. Outside, a miserable Philly wind rattled the window panes, but the chill inside our home was 1,000 times more brutal. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, a woman who had mastered the art of being invisible, set her fork down with a barely audible clink. Her laugh was a pathetic, nervous flutter that died before it could even take flight. "Honey, maybe we should talk about this later. The kids—" "No." The legs of Kevin's chair shrieked against the linoleum as he shot to his feet, a towering monument of ungrateful rage. He was a big man, made bigger by his own self-importance. "Dad, you need to listen, and you need to listen good. The property tax bill is due. Lily needs braces, that's $5,000 right there. Noah's summer camp isn't going to pay for itself. Do you have any idea how much it costs to live? Do you think your pathetic little Social Security check is going to make a dent in that?" He gestured wildly around the room, at the granite countertops I'd paid for, the stainless steel appliances I'd installed. I watched my granddaughter's perfect little face crumple, her lower lip trembling as her father's voice boomed. These children, these innocent souls, should have been shielded from this ugliness. But Kevin was so consumed by his financial panic that he'd forgotten how to be a father. His greed had cauterized his heart. "Son, you have absolutely no right to speak to me that way, and you have no right to my money." The statement was simple, a quiet truth spoken into a hurricane of entitlement. It struck him harder than a physical blow. His face was a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, disbelief, fury, and then a terrifying, calculating coldness. It was a look I hadn't seen since my wife's estranged brother had tried to contest her will. "Right?" He let out a bark of a laugh, a sound utterly devoid of humor. He spread his arms wide, a martyr on a self-made cross. "I have every right. This is my house, old man. Remember?" He sneered, tapping his temple. "You signed it over to me 5 years ago. To avoid probate, you said. To make things simpler. Well, things just got very simple. If you're not contributing, you're not a resident. You're a tenant, and tenants pay rent." The world tilted on its axis. The kitchen, my kitchen, seemed to shrink and warp around me. Lily began to cry, fat tears rolling down her pale cheeks. Noah, ever the protector, slid his hand across the table and squeezed hers. Jessica's face had turned the color of ash. Her loyalty was a tug-of-war rope, stretched between the monster she'd married and the father-in-law who had walked her down the aisle when her own father refused to. "Kevin, please," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Don't do this." He shot her a look that was pure venom, and she wilted, silenced. I pushed myself away from the table, the movement slow and deliberate. Every joint screamed in protest after another sleepless night on the lumpy mattress in the guest room they'd assigned me. 67 years on this earth had taught me many things, but chief among them was knowing which battles to fight and when to make a strategic retreat. This was a retreat. "I'm filing the paperwork today," I said, my voice as steady as a rock. Without another glance at my son's triumphant, ugly face, I walked out of the kitchen. I grabbed my worn leather jacket from the hook by the door, a jacket Eleanor had given me for my 40th birthday, and stepped out into the raw March morning. The front door clicked shut behind me, a sound of grim finality. As I walked down the cracked pavement of Sycamore Street, the street where I had taught Kevin to ride a bike, I could still hear his muffled shouting. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the sound of victory. But I wasn't defeated. I was just getting started. The dawn over Philadelphia broke in shades of gray and bruised purple, a reflection of my own battered spirit. The threats from the previous morning were a relentless echo in my head. Downstairs, the house was unnervingly quiet. Kevin and his family were ghosts, their avoidance a palpable presence in the home that was no longer mine. I dressed in the dark, choosing my warmest flannel shirt, a silent armor against the coldness that had seeped into my bones. The worn manila folder, my lifeline, was already prepared. The Social Security office was downtown, a journey into the heart of a city that felt as alien to me as a foreign country. The SEPTA bus groaned to a halt at the corner, its brakes hissing in the damp air. I climbed aboard, another weary face in a sea of mourning commuters. An older woman with kind eyes and a brightly colored headscarf offered me a small smile as I sat opposite her. "Nasty morning?" she said, her voice raspy. "But the crocuses are coming up. Spring always finds a way." Her simple words felt like a prophecy, a tiny spark of hope in the vast darkness. I looked out the grimy window as the familiar landscape of my life rolled by. The corner store where I'd bought Eleanor her favorite chocolates. The park where I'd pushed Kevin on the swings. The church where we had christened him. And later, where I had buried her. This city was a graveyard of memories, and I was its lonely groundskeeper. The federal building was a monument of impersonal concrete and steel. The security check was a small, systematic humiliation. Belt off, shoes off, jacket off. Inside, under the relentless hum of fluorescent lights, dozens of people who looked just like me sat in sterile plastic chairs, clutching their own folders, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and quiet desperation. Arthur Blackwood? A woman with a warm, professional smile and intelligent eyes called my name. I'm Diana Sterling. Sorry for the wait. Her office was a small, tidy oasis in the bureaucratic desert. Pictures of her smiling children shared desk space with formidable-looking legal texts. Please, have a seat, she said, her voice a soothing balm. Let's see what we're working with. The paperwork was a mountain, a dizzying array of forms and codes and boxes to be ticked. SSA 1, SSA 338, W4V. It was a language I didn't understand, but Diana translated it with infinite patience. She went through my 45 years of pay stubs from Bethlehem Steel, her respect growing with each documented year of labor. Mr. Blackwood, this is an incredible work history. You've more than earned this retirement. Finally get to be free, I muttered, the words escaping before I could censor them. They carried the full weight of my recent heartbreak. Diana's professional demeanor softened. A flicker of profound understanding crossed her face. Family trouble? She asked gently. I could only nod, the lump in my throat too big to speak around. She had seen it all before. She knew the stories of children who saw their aging parents not as people, but as untapped assets. Throughout our meeting, my phone vibrated angrily in my pocket. Kevin's name flashed on the screen again and again. I ignored every call, a small act of defiance that felt monumental. When the last form was signed and the last document initialed, I finally answered. Dad, what the hell are you doing? You're blowing up our lives. His voice was a frantic whine. No, Kevin, I said, my voice low but firm, acutely aware of Diana organizing my file nearby. I'm finally starting mine. Processing will take about 6 to 8 weeks, Diana explained after I hung up. Assuming there are no complications, you should receive your first direct deposit around the middle of May. The bus ride home was different. A weight had been lifted. The folder in my lap wasn't just paper. It was proof. It was the first brick in the new foundation of my life. Kevin was waiting for me when I got home, his face a thundercloud of resentment. But he must have seen something new in my eyes, a glint of steel he hadn't anticipated because he said nothing. He just retreated into his home office, and I heard him on the phone, his voice hushed and urgent, talking to someone about credit lines and refinancing. The war had begun, and for the first time, I felt like I had an army at my back. The weeks that followed were a grueling test of patience. A new routine formed. Check the mail, walk the neighborhood, count the meager cash I had hidden away. Kevin's periodic attempts to wear me down, alternating between threats and pathetic pleas, only solidified my resolve. May 15th dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring day that mocked the turmoil of the past few months. I'd been checking my bank account online every morning, my heart hammering with a mixture of hope and dread. The ritual was always the same. Coffee, laptop, login screen. Today was different. There, on the screen, a line item that made my breath catch in my chest. U.S. Treasury, 310. Success, pending deposit, 2,168 succers. It was more than I'd dared to hope for. My rough calculations had been conservative, but the reality of the number was staggering. It was real. It was mine. I stared at the screen, tears blurring the numbers. I earned this, I whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of Eleanor who I felt was watching over me. Every damn cent. The walk to the PNC Bank on Broad Street was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I felt the phantom weight of the money in my pocket, a talisman against the world. The spring air felt good on my face. A clean slate. Linda, the bank teller who had known me for 2 decades, greeted me with her usual warm smile. "Mr. Blackwood, good to see you. What can we do for you today?" "Better than I've been in a long time, Linda." I pushed my debit card and a withdrawal slip through the slot. "I'd like to take out $2,400 in cash." Her eyes widened slightly as she processed the request, but she was the soul of discretion. "Celebrating something special, Arthur?" she asked kindly. "My independence," I replied, and the truth of it resonated in my own ears. The counting machine whirred, a mechanical symphony of my freedom. She stacked the bills neatly, hundreds, 50s, 20s. The physical weight of the cash in the thick bank envelope was grounding, a tangible representation of 45 years of sweat and sacrifice. The walk home was a daze of quiet triumph. I stopped at a payphone, a relic from another era, and called my old friend from the mill, Frank. He was the only one I had confided in. "Frank, I got it. I'm free." His boisterous laugh boomed over the line. "Attaboy, Artie, I knew you had it in ya. First round's on you." Back in the house, I went straight to my room and locked the door. I counted the money again, slowly, savoring each bill. Then I hid the thick stacks in the false bottom of an old wooden chest where I kept Eleanor's letters, a place of sacred trust. That night, I made myself a simple steak dinner, a small extravagance. Kevin was working late, and the house was quiet. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. Before I went to sleep, I looked at the hidden money one last time. It was more than cash. It was a future. It was my ticket out. Sleep came easily. My dreams filled not with anxiety, but with open roads and endless possibilities. I awoke to the golden light of a new day pouring through my window, the kind of morning that feels like a promise. The triumphant feeling from yesterday was a warm glow in my chest. $2,468. A war chest. My escape fund. Hidden. Safe. Today, the real planning would begin. I'd look for a small apartment, maybe in a different part of the city, a place where Kevin's shadow couldn't reach. The future felt like a blank page, and I finally had the ink to write on it. I swung my legs out of bed, a smile on my face for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The old wooden chest sat in the corner, solid and unassuming. I knelt before it, my heart beating a little faster with anticipation. The lid opened with a familiar, comforting creak. I lifted the tray of Eleanor's letters, their faded ink a testament to a love that had weathered every storm. But beneath them, where the thick, comforting bundles of cash should have been, there was nothing. Just the bare, splintered wood of the false bottom, and sitting precisely in the center, a single, crisp $20 bill and a few coins. $17.38. My blood ran cold. No. The word was a choked whisper. My hands, suddenly clumsy and trembling, scrabbled in the empty space, searching for something that wasn't there. It was impossible. I slammed the lid shut and ripped it open again, a frantic, desperate prayer that my eyes had deceived me. Nothing. Just that insulting, pathetic pile of money mocking me. A tidal wave of panic rose in my throat. I tore my room apart. I ripped the sheets off the bed, searched under the mattress, inside the pillowcases. I emptied every drawer, my socks and underwear and old photographs scattering across the floor like debris after an explosion. I checked behind the picture frames, inside my shoes in the closet, in the pockets of every jacket. Nothing. The window was locked from the inside. The door to my room showed no signs of being forced. Whoever did this had a key, Whoever did this knew the layout of the house. Whoever did this knew exactly where to look. But who? Frank was the only person I'd told. But Frank lived across town and hadn't set foot in this house in years. The horrifying realization began to assemble itself in my mind, piece by agonizing piece. An inside job, someone who lived here, someone who could move through the house at night, silently, like a thief. Someone who had watched me, listened to me. The thought was a shard of ice in my gut, but I couldn't ignore it. Kevin. He knew I had received my money. He had been desperate. When his bullying failed, had he stooped to this? To common thievery in the dead of night? The smell of coffee and the sound of the morning news drifted up from downstairs. A perfectly normal morning in a house of horrors. It was time to face the monster. I descended the stairs like a man walking to his own execution. The sounds from the kitchen, the clink of spoons against ceramic, the murmur of the television, were a grotesque parody of happy family life. Jessica stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. Lily and Noah were at the table, their faces buried in comic books. And there was Kevin, sitting in my chair at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone, a portrait of casual domesticity. He glanced up as I entered the room. A flicker of something. Was it guilt? No, it was triumph, in his eyes before it was gone. "Morning, Dad. Sleep okay?" His voice was so normal it was insane. I held up the paltry sum of money in my shaking hand. The coins rattled with a sound like dying hope. "My money is gone, Kevin. Someone robbed me last night." Jessica's hand froze over the stove, the spatula hovering. The children looked up from their comics, their eyes wide with alarm. But Kevin didn't even have the decency to feign surprise. He slowly, deliberately, locked his phone and placed it face down on the table. He took a sip of his coffee. "Nobody robbed you, Dad," he said, his voice as calm and cold as a mortician's slab. "I took it." The admission didn't lessen the blow. It sharpened it, drove it deeper. Jessica let out a tiny gasp. Lily's face began to crumple. "Why?" The word was torn from my soul. "Why would you do that?" He had the audacity to sigh, as if I were a difficult child. He stood up, towering over me, a smug, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Because you didn't listen. I told you what would happen. I told you we needed that money." He reached into the pocket of his silk pajama bottoms and pulled out a thick, neat stack of bills. My bills. My freedom. "Consider this your rent for the month. And your security deposit. From now on, I'll be managing your pension. I'll give you a weekly allowance for your little expenses. $20 should be plenty." The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it stole my breath. "That's my money! You're a thief! My own son is a goddamn thief!" My voice cracked, raw with a pain so profound it felt like it was splitting me in two. "Watch your tone in my house," he hissed, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. He peeled a single $20 bill from the top of the stack and held it out to me. Held it out like he was feeding a stray dog. "Here, your allowance for the week. That's more than fair, considering you get free room and board." "My house," I choked out. "I bled for this house for 35 years. "Prove it," he sneered. "The deed has my name on it. As far as the law is concerned, you're a guest, and right now you're an unwelcome one." Jessica finally found her voice, a weak, trembling whisper. "Kevin, for God's sake, this is your father." He turned on her, his eyes blazing. "You stay out of this, Jessica!" he snapped, and the threat in his voice was so naked that she physically recoiled. Lily was openly sobbing now, and Noah was trying to shield her, his small face a mask of fury and fear. They were watching their grandfather be systematically dismantled by their own father, a lesson in cruelty that would scar them for life. Kevin pocketed my money and sat back down, picking up his fork as if nothing had happened. $20 a week, Dad. Take it or leave it. The curb is free. The ultimatum was a death sentence. A white-hot rage, pure and cleansing, began to burn away the grief. But I held it in check. I looked at my grandchildren, their innocent faces streaked with tears, and I knew I couldn't fight this battle here, not like this. I'm sorry you have to see this, I whispered to them. Kevin finished his pancakes with agonizing slowness, then stood up, kissed Jessica on the cheek like a normal, loving husband, and grabbed his briefcase. Think it over, Dad. It's a good deal, he said, and walked out the door. The sound of his BMW starting up was the sound of my life hitting rock bottom. I waited. I let the silence in the house settle. I waited until Jessica had shuffled the weeping children out the door for school. I waited 10 more minutes, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. Then I walked to the hallway that led to their master bedroom. The door, usually locked, was slightly ajar. He had grown arrogant, careless. He thought he had already won. His expensive leather briefcase was sitting on the polished top of his dresser. It wasn't latched. Inside, tucked beneath a sheaf of investment reports, was a thick manila envelope. My money. I counted it. He'd taken the 20 he'd offered me out of it. The rest was there. $2,448. I slipped the bills into the deep inner pocket of my jacket. Let him come home to the same sickening emptiness I'd woken up to. Let him feel that violation, just for a moment. Upstairs, in my room, I packed a single bag. Clothes, my shaving kit, my bank documents, the deed to the house with his name on it, and the small framed photo of Eleanor that always sat on my nightstand. I tucked it carefully into my jacket, right next to the money. She would give me strength. Jessica was standing in the doorway when I came out, her face a mess of tears and helpless regret. Arthur, please don't leave. We can talk to him when he gets home. We can fix this. Your husband is a criminal, Jessica, I said, my voice devoid of heat, just a cold, hard fact. There is nothing left to fix. She followed me down the stairs, babbling about compromises and arrangements, but it was all just noise. This was never just about the money. It was about respect. It was about my soul. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the street where I had lived for 4 decades. The sun was shining. Neighbors were watering their lawns. The world kept turning, oblivious. I walked away from the house I had built, the family I had raised, and I did not look back. 3 blocks away, I saw the faded sign for the Liberty Bell Inn, a rundown motel that promised weekly rates and asked no questions. I slid $60 in cash across the counter to a clerk who looked like he'd died a week ago and just hadn't laid down yet. Room 214 smelled of stale smoke and despair, but the lock on the door was solid. I threw my bag on the bed and sank onto the lumpy mattress, the full weight of my 67 years crashing down on me. I pulled out Eleanor's picture. Her smile was a beacon in the gloom. "Oh, Ellie," I whispered to the empty, silent room. "Our boy, he's become a monster." How had this happened? How did the sweet boy who cried for a week when his pet hamster died become this cold, calculating predator? I remembered working double shifts, my body screaming with exhaustion, just to pay for his MBA at Wharton. He had potential, they said. He could be somebody. So I sold my classic Mustang, my one prized possession, and took the bus to the mill for 3 years straight. Anything for him. Anything to give him the life I never had. When Eleanor got sick, the cancer eating away at her light, he was there at first. But as the medical bills piled up, his visits became shorter, his excuses more frequent. After the funeral, he was the one who suggested I sign the house over. It's just for tax purposes, Dad. It'll protect the asset for the future. My future? What a damn fool I was. And now, here I was, hiding in a roach-infested motel with my own stolen money, a fugitive in my own life. The grief was a physical pain, a crushing weight on my chest. But as the hours ticked by in that lonely room, the grief began to cool, to harden. It wasn't despair I was feeling anymore. It was rage, pure, unadulterated, diamond-hard rage. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was done being a victim. Kevin had started a war. Now it was time for me to teach him how it would end. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the Philadelphia Free Library hummed above me, a stark contrast to the dim, desperate quiet of my motel room. For 2 solid days, I'd done nothing but research. Armed with a library card and a burning need for vengeance, I dove into the labyrinth of the internet. I searched for financial elder abuse, parental rights, stolen inheritance. The stories I found were horrifyingly familiar. Sons and daughters, just like Kevin, preying on the very people who gave them life. I wasn't alone. And more importantly, I learned I had rights. I found a name, a place. The Senior Law Center on Chestnut Street, a nonprofit that offered free legal counsel to people just like me. I called and made an appointment, my voice shaking with a mixture of nerves and newfound purpose. I spent the next 2 days gathering my ammunition. I printed out bank statements showing decades of mortgage payments from my account. I found old tax returns where I claimed the property tax. I even found the original bill of sale for the house from 1985, my name and Eleanor's right there in bold print. I put everything into a neat folder, a testament to a life of responsibility that my son had tried to erase. When I walked into the Senior Law Center, I felt like a soldier heading into battle. The woman who met me was Diana Sterling, the same woman I'd met at the Social Security office. It turned out she split her time, a crusader fighting on multiple fronts. When she saw me and the folder in my hand, a look of grim recognition crossed her face. "Mr. Blackwood, I had a feeling I'd be seeing you again. Let's talk." In her office, the story poured out of me. The retirement, the theft, the $20 allowance, the sneering command to prove it. She listened with an intensity that was both validating and terrifying, her pen scratching furiously across a legal pad. When I was done, a heavy silence filled the room. She reached for my folder and began to examine the documents, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She paid special attention to the deed I'd signed over to Kevin. She studied it for a long moment, then turned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. An eyebrow arched. Then the other one. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice laced with the thrill of the hunt. "This is going to be interesting. The deed transfer was improperly filed. His lawyer made a clerical error, a fatal one." I stared at her, not daring to breathe. What does that mean?" "It means," she said, leaning forward, her eyes gleaming, "that according to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you are still the legal sole owner of 125 Sycamore Street. Your son is, for all legal intents and purposes, a squatter, and he has just committed multiple felonies against you." The words washed over me, a baptism of fire and hope. "You mean I can get him out?" "Get him out?" she laughed, a sharp, satisfying sound. "Oh, we're going to do so much more than that. We are going to demand he vacate the premises. We are going to sue him for the money he stole. We're going to sue him for emotional distress. And then we're going to bill him for retroactive rent for every single day he has lived in your house since you signed that defective deed 5 years ago." She began pulling forms from a filing cabinet, her movements crisp and efficient. "Your son wanted you to prove the house was yours. Well, we're about to prove it in a way that will financially cripple him for the rest of his life. For the first time since this nightmare began, a genuine smile touched my lips. "What's the first step?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "The first step," she said, handing me a pen, "is a formal, certified letter of eviction and a demand for payment. It will inform him that he has 30 days to vacate your property and return your money, plus damages. If he refuses—" She paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "Then we unleash hell. I know many of you watching have faced your own betrayals, your own moments of utter despair. I was at my lowest point, a ghost in my own life. Have you ever felt that way? Like the world had chewed you up and spit you out? If you have, I want you to hit that like button right now. Let's get this video to 20,000 likes to show everyone who is fighting a silent battle that they are not, and will never be, alone. Your strength is greater than your struggle." The main post office on Market Street was an imposing stone fortress, a fitting place to launch the first volley in my war. Diana stood beside me as the clerk stamped the thick official envelope with a series of loud, satisfying thuds. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Signature required. "I want to see the ink from his own pen, proving he got it," I told Diana. She just smiled. "He'll get it." 4 days later, the signed green card came back to my new mailing address, a small, clean studio apartment in Fishtown I'd rented with my reclaimed cash. The signature was a frantic, angry scrawl. Kevin had received the letter at 3:15 p.m. on a Friday. I imagined the scene. Him arriving home from a week of playing the big shot, pouring himself a drink, and then opening the letter that would detonate his entire world. My phone rang precisely 30 minutes later. "Are you insane?" he screamed, his voice a distorted howl of rage and panic. "What is this nonsense? Retroactive rent? Eviction? This is my house." "No, Kevin," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "This is my house. Your lawyer made a mistake, a big one. You have 30 days. You can't do this to me, to your own family. Jessica is... We have children." The desperation was palpable. He was no longer the confident predator. He was a cornered animal. "You should have thought of your children before you stole from their grandfather," I said, enjoying the power shift more than I probably should have. "Every mortgage payment, every tax bill, every repair for the last 5 years was paid from my accounts. You lived for free, and then you got greedy. This is the consequence." There was a long silence, filled with the sound of his ragged breathing. The bluster was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. "Dad, let's just talk. We can work this out. I'll give you the money back." "The time for talking is over, son. The terms are in the letter. 30 days to vacate, full restitution of the stolen funds, and a certified check for $120,000 in back rent. Those are my terms. They are not negotiable." $120,000? I don't have that kind of money, he shrieked. "Then you shouldn't have stolen mine," I replied, and the line that followed still gives me chills. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling my lawyer." "Please do," I said, savoring every word. Mine is very much looking forward to explaining the finer points of felony financial elder abuse to yours. I hung up the phone, the silence in my small apartment feeling not empty, but full of a profound and terrible justice. The clock was ticking for Kevin. 30 days, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. The courtroom was cold, imposing, all dark wood and high ceilings that seemed to absorb all the sound and hope from the room. I sat beside Diana, wearing the only suit I owned, the one I'd worn to Eleanor's funeral. It felt strangely appropriate. I was here to bury the last vestiges of the man my son had become. Across the aisle, Kevin sat with a slick, expensive-looking lawyer. My son looked like he hadn't slept in a month. His face was pale and drawn, the arrogant smirk replaced by a terrified, hunted look. Jessica sat behind him, looking small and broken. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Case number CV-225943, Blackwood versus Blackwood, the bailiff droned. Judge Eleanor Vance, a stern-faced woman with a reputation for taking no nonsense, peered down at us over her glasses. "I have read the briefs," she stated, her voice sharp. "This is a serious accusation. Let's not waste the court's time." Diana rose, a pillar of calm confidence. She laid out the case with surgical precision. She presented the faulty deed, the expert testimony confirming it was invalid. She presented my bank statements, a 40-year history of me paying for that house. She presented the evidence of Kevin's theft. And then she called her witnesses. My old neighbor, Mrs. Gable, testified that she'd heard Kevin screaming at me for years, calling me a useless old freeloader. My friend Frank testified that I had sold my prized car to pay for Kevin's education. A bank official testified that Kevin had made numerous inquiries about my pension account in the months leading up to my retirement. Each testimony was another nail in Kevin's coffin. When it was Kevin's lawyer's turn, his defense was pathetic. He argued it was a family arrangement. Judge Vance cut him off. "Was this arrangement documented, counsel? Is there a rental agreement? Is there any proof of your client contributing to the mortgage or taxes?" The lawyer stammered. There was nothing. When Kevin took the stand, it was a disaster. Under Diana's relentless cross-examination, he admitted everything. He admitted he'd never paid a dime for the house. He admitted he took my pension check. He tried to claim it was a loan, but Diana shredded him. "A loan, Mr. Blackwood? Did you sign a promissory note? Did you inform your father of the repayment terms? Or did you just take his life savings while he slept?" He broke down, a blubbering, pathetic mess of a man, sobbing about his financial pressures and how I didn't understand. Finally, Judge Vance had heard enough. She held up her hand for silence. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her eyes fixed on Kevin, "for 5 years you have lived in your father's home, rent-free. He paid for your shelter, he paid for your comfort, and in return, you preyed upon him in his old age. You stole from him. You abused his trust. You are a disgrace." She looked at me, and for the first time, her expression softened. "And you, sir," she said to me, "are a victim of one of the most egregious cases of elder abuse I have ever seen." Then she lowered the boom. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The eviction is granted. The defendants have 60 days to vacate the property. Full restitution of the stolen funds is ordered immediately. Furthermore, the court awards the plaintiff retroactive rent for the full 5-year period, totaling $120,000, plus an additional $20,000 for emotional distress." A strangled sob escaped from Kevin. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. It was over. I had won. But standing there, watching my son completely fall apart, I felt no joy. Only a profound, aching sadness for the boy I had lost so long ago. Justice, I discovered, had a bitter taste. It's August now. The sun is streaming through the windows of my kitchen. My kitchen. In my house, it took 2 months for the dust to settle. Kevin and his family moved into a small apartment across the river. He sold his precious BMW to make the first payment on the judgment he owes me. The money arrives in my bank account on the 1st of every month, a stark, electronic reminder of his betrayal. The house is quiet now. I've started to reclaim it. I took down the cold, modern art Jessica favored and hung up my old photos of Eleanor. I'm planting a garden in the backyard, full of the roses she loved. The silence that once felt like a weapon against me now feels like peace. I volunteer 3 days a week at the Senior Law Center, helping people like me navigate the system. I share my story, and I see the flicker of hope in their eyes. the same hope Diana gave to me. My story, I've learned, is not just my own. It is the story of every person who has ever been made to feel small, invisible, and powerless. It's a story about finding your voice, even when it shakes. Kevin called me last week. It was the first time we'd spoken since the trial. His voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, humbled tone. "Dad," he said, I am so sorry." I didn't know what to say. The wound is too deep, the scar too fresh. "I know, son," I said. "You taught me to be strong, Kevin. Now you have to pay for the lesson. Maybe one day forgiveness will be possible, but not today. Today is for healing. My real wealth isn't the money in the bank. It's the dignity that was returned to me. It's the peace I feel when I sit on my own porch, in my own chair, watching the sunset. It's knowing that I fought back, not just for myself, but for every elderly parent who has ever been taken for granted. I took the first payment Kevin sent me, and, in Eleanor's name, I started a small fund at the center to help cover initial legal fees for seniors who can't afford it. Her legacy will not be her son's greed. It will be her husband's resilience. It will be helping others find their own justice. If my story has moved you, if it has meant something to you, please do me one last favor. Share this video. There is someone out there who needs to hear this right now. Someone who feels alone and defeated. Let them know they are not. And please subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter. To hear another incredible story of justice, click on the box you see on the screen now. Thank you for listening.